Hey everybody, I'm Grandmaster Ben Finegold here with our weekly lecture series. This lecture is on unusual endgames with unusual material imbalances, and I decided to use my own games throughout my career. Ever since I was a kid until now, I've had lots of unusual endgames. Thank our sponsor, Anonymous. If you want to sponsor a lecture, contact Karen at the email address on the screen, and you can sponsor a lecture too. Now, unfortunately, in this lecture, a lot of the interesting endgames I found were games I lost. So I didn't do very well this stream compared to other streams. Okay, first game was played in 1983 between Dexter Thompson, who's a master, and myself. And in 83, I would have been, at this tournament, probably about 2,100, I guess. So I was probably about 100 points lower than my opponent. And let me get rid of the notation. Okay. So we have the right screen now. So this position, it's white to move. I had the black pieces. And bishop's attacking the queen. I think white thought in this position he could take on d5, and then he thought better of it. If white plays queen takes d5, which wins a piece and forks two other pieces, sounds good. I can play rook d8 and take advantage of the fact that he doesn't have back rank defense. So if he takes my knight, I play rook d1 checkmate. It's funny he can't check, because if he checks here, I can take it. So it's sort of like works out for me somehow. Okay, so he didn't do that. He played queen g4. Now we have this imbalanced endgame where he has a queen and two pawns for a rook, bishop, and knight. And at first glance, it's not really clear who's better. But it turns out, unfortunately for me, white's better, because white has an extra pawn on the queen side, white has an extra pawn on the king side, and I think most importantly, black's king isn't very safe because of my pawn structure on the king side, and his king is very safe. Okay, now currently he's attacking my knight. Now the rest of the game actually took about 50 moves. We're only on move 29-30 here, and the game ended on move 77. So, okay, I played rook b8, threatening, more back rank shenanigans. And he played h4, so now there's no shenanigans. Knight b6, defending my knight on c4. a4, a5. And he centralized his knight with knight d4. So the thing is, I can't really whip up an attack on his king because my pieces just aren't ready for that. And this position, I can't take the pawn on a4 because he plays knight c6, attacking this and attacking this and attacking this. And that knight's not so good either. Put pressure on here. So that's too risky. Okay, so I played bishop f6, which is the correct move. Getting my bishop to a nice diagonal, safe, make my king safe. Queen e6, attacking my bishop. The engine says I should play king g7. I played rook f8. It's a little worse. g3, king g7, h5. The thing is, black can't really do anything here, although the engine seems to want me to take this and get this position. And again, I don't see what black can really do in this position except hope to draw. So I played g takes h5, which is a mistake, letting his knight come in. And then he traded knights, which isn't really the engine favorite. Although this was played in 1983, so I guess engines had no say at that time. 95. My knight's attacked, and my knight is defending my pawn on a5, and I'd like to play rook c8, but queen d7 check wins my rook. So I have to move my knight and give up my a pawn. And now he has 2 passed pawns on the queen's side, so my only real hope is to attack his king, which I tried to do. And I should take on g3 here, but I played this. Then I took on g3. I was hoping he would take my knight, and then I can play bishop e7 check and win his queen. But okay, would be a silly blunder from him. Okay, he checked, and then he took my pawn. And we still have this material imbalance, but the 2 passed pawns for white make it much more likely that he's going to win the game. I don't really have any good counterattack. So I sacrificed a piece. And this position with black to play is almost certainly a draw. I just play like bishop d8 and bishop f6. Just a draw. But unfortunately, by getting rid of all of his passed pawns, I allowed queen d4 check. I must play king g8, and he wins my bishop. And I thought I had drawing chances here, but I don't. If I had an f pawn instead of an h pawn, then it would be a draw, because my rook would have 2 squares to go to. But now my rook only has the g6 square, and then I'm sort of stuck. So I got the blockading position, but then I couldn't do anything. He couldn't win my rook, so he just kept bringing his king up when he couldn't win my rook. Although he tried to win my rook. Okay, and then he brought his king up. And eventually I run out of moves. And now he plays queen e7 check.
Excuse me, we might have a late entry. Did you see somebody?
Yeah, somebody came in.
Okay, good.
Yep. Uh-huh. Then king g8, queen d8, queen e8. So a nice zugzwang triangulation. Now I can't move my king because there's no legal way to do so. I can't move my h-pawn because then he takes my rook. So therefore, I have to move my rook. And if I move it to these squares, he takes it. So I have 3 moves. Rook here, rook here, rook here. And they all lose my rook. Rook here loses my rook to check. Rook here loses my rook to queen check, then queen check. And rook a6 loses my rook for the same reason. Queen check and queen c8 check. So that's a nice zugzwang position. Again, if my pawn was on f7, this would be a drawn endgame, but not on h7. So here I resigned. So it's funny, like these positions occur often in practice where somebody has a queen for some amount of material, like a rook and 2 pieces, or 2 rooks, or a rook and 4 pawns, or something like that. And in practical play, it's a lot easier to play with the queen than to coordinate your pieces. And I have a feeling if an engine today had black against a master player, black would have done fine. But since neither one of us were grandmasters at the time, you know, it's very difficult to play black and coordinate all of your pieces when you just have one piece, the queen, that just moves around taking everything. So that was an unfortunate loss by me. I never thought I'd lecture on it. But... Okay, next game. Let's see, I had white. I learned something interesting this game. So this looks completely lost. Black's a piece ahead, and black's threatening rook h5 checkmate with advantage. But it's white's move. This is a game I had white against a very low-rated player in the Michigan Open in 1984. The game that I just showed you with Dexter Thompson, that was from the 83 Michigan Open. Hey, we have a late entry. Hello, welcome to the lecture. Even people on YouTube are showing up later, even though they haven't happened yet. Or maybe they have. Maybe as you're watching this on YouTube, it's live for you too. Okay, so this game wasn't going well for me. I'm down a piece, and black's threatening mate in 1 with rook h5 mate. So that's not good. There's good and there's not good. That's not good. Okay, so when I was going to lecture on this game today, normally I start from a later position, which I'll get to and talk to you. But here we have a material imbalance where black's up a piece for 2 pawns, but white's 2 pawns are passed pawns on the king side. One's on the 6th rank. So the best move for white is relatively obvious since I need my pawns to be connected, because they're just so far apart. And black's threatening rook h5 mate, so I played g4. So I want to play g5 and, so forth. So turns out the engine says this position's equal, which is surprising to me because black's up a piece. And I thought my opponent's next move was a mistake, letting me equalize, but it turns out that my position's already okay. So he played bishop e3, attacking my h-pawn. I can't move my h-pawn because it's defending my rook. So I took on c7, got rid of my passed pawn. I took on b7. Now I wasn't worried about losing because he only has 1 pawn left. Rook e7. I traded rooks because when you have pawns for a piece, you want nothing on the board. You want 3 pawns versus a piece. If there's extra pieces on the board, that just helps the pieces. It's hard to queen your pawns when there's a lot of pieces on the board. When there's nothing on the board, then it's easy to queen your pawns because nothing can stop them. So trading rooks actually helps white. Then I move my king up, of course. So does my opponent. Can't move my king up anymore. So I moved it, played b3. And then I played king e2 to get my king over to the queen side. And here he made a mistake, I think, although maybe it's not a mistake. It doesn't lose, so maybe it's not a mistake. He played king f4, letting my king come over here. And I played b4. And I've been showing this position to students for years because black is drawing here, but there's only one move that draws. So if you're watching on YouTube, pause the video here and try to find the only move that draws for black, which I think would be hard even for a grandmaster. And since I was rated 2200, my opponent was rated like 1400, we weren't necessarily playing the best moves. Although I've been playing okay since I started showing you the game. If I started showing you earlier, then play so well this game. Okay, so my opponent made a mistake. He took the pawn on b4, after which he's losing. The only drawing move, surprisingly, is king f3. And the reason is black wants to play bishop e3, and if white plays king c4, black wants to play king e4. So what's funny about this is if I play b5 and he plays bishop e3, actually black's winning here. White just stopped himself from doing anything with his pawns. And now you have to go back. And this is just a winning position for black. White's going to lose all of his pawns on the queen side. And after you take, you can play bishop e3. And white doesn't really have any way to get his pawns going. Because if you move your king, black moves their king. And just the pawns are stopped. There's no way for white to win. So king f3 is the only drawing move. My opponent played takes, and now actually white is winning. Because the pawns get to push both pawns now. And best part is I can never lose, because he doesn't have any pawns left. Anyway, he tried to get his bishop over there to stop my pawns. Now I played a really nice move, although it turns out if I play like a normal move, I'm winning anyway. But I want to get my king over to the queen side, but I don't want his king to come to the queen side. So I play king e4. So my king's heading over here, and his king is not. I get a tempo on his bishop. And black resigned because I'm going to go here. So that was an imbalance in the endgame of a bishop for pawns. And even though I only had 2 pawns for the bishop, with the pieces being traded and nothing left on the board for him, he was the one who was fighting for a draw. And in the one position where he had to play king f3, he couldn't find it and ended up losing the game. So that was a drawn ending to start. But with my pawns and my king getting advanced and him not getting any counterplay, eventually white won. Okay, and I'm white in this game. This is my game with future world champion Viswanathan from Oakham 1986, which was a junior tournament for strong junior players. Once again, we have an imbalance. White has 2 pawns for a piece, which is what I had last game. And he's threatening my f2 pawn, so I played rook c2 because that's the best move. It defends my f2 pawn. And this had a big impact on me, my chess career, and what Vishy did in this position. The engine says the best move is rook f3, and he played the second best move, which is much more impressive. And they're about the same. But when you have extra pieces against pawns, the pawns want to promote, as you saw last game. And the pieces want to get active and do stuff. And the problem is, for him, although his rook and bishop are quite active and strong and on good squares, his knight is not. His knight can't go to e5, can't go to f4, can't go to h4. If you go to e7, then what are you doing? So his knight wants to get to some good square like d4, d3, f3, some square that knight's good. And I remember when I played rook c2, Anand, who was always a very fast player, but when he was younger, he was incredibly fast. He instantly played this move, a move I would never think of. Although now I think of moves like this because of this game. And he played knight h8. He played it so quickly, I was like, what? Knight h8. And the idea is, wants to play knight f7, knight g5, and then either knight h3 check, or knight f3 check, or knight takes e4. Or, if somehow he can't do that, he could play knight f7 at d6, which he would do if my knight wasn't on b5. So knight on d6 is pretty good. Knight h8 is a good move, so black should be winning. I played knight c7 to play knight e6. He played his knight to f7. I played knight e6, attacking his rook. He played rook a8, attacking my a pawn. And his knight's really well placed to stop any tricks. So for example, if I take this, he plays knight d6, stopping me from coming to the back rank in case he does that. And he's threatening my e4 pawn, and there's no defense. And he's threatening my a2 pawn. So he'll get one of the pawns, and his knight will be really active. So I didn't do that. I played a3. So I'll play knight takes bishop next move, or so I hope. Knight d6. b4, attacking his bishop. Bishop's almost trapped. Rook c6. And I get my passed pawn going by playing d6. So the game got really complicated all of a sudden because his knight got really active, which is what he wanted to do. And he won a pawn, which he also wants to do. He's threatening my f2 pawn, and he can win that pawn too. But with my extra pawn on the queen side, I'm threatening to promote my pawn. So I have counterplay with my passed pawn. He played knight f6, stopping my passed pawn. I played rook c7 because I want to play d7 and push my passed pawn. He attacked my rook and my pawn, so I move back. Now I'm threatening to play d7 again. And in this position, the engine says he should play rook a7, stopping my pawn from going to d7. But he did play rook a7. Okay, and I played rook to c8, king to f7, knight d8 check, knight c6. Now I'm attacking his rook and his knight. Attacking his knight this way and his rook this way. So he gets rid of my passed pawn and sacks a piece. Knight takes pawn, knight takes rook, knight takes rook, knight takes. Looks like white's lost because my king's no good and his king's really good. And my knight's almost trapped also. He can try to trap my knight, or he can walk his king up here against my pawns. His bishop is dominant. My king isn't getting anywhere good. So it looks good, but the engine says it's a draw still. I have the queenside pawn majority, so I use it. And now, if I take this pawn, then he plays king b3, and he'll win both of my pawns, have a passed b pawn, which is good winning chances. So I actually played a very strong move here because I have more pawns on the queen side. So I played a5. Okay, so the idea is if he takes with the bishop, for example, and takes my knight, then I queen my pawn. I queen before he does. And if he takes with a pawn, the same, I play b5, b6, and try to queen my pawn. Okay, so he played b takes a5. He did play b takes, or no. Yeah, he played b takes a5. Now, if I play b6, he can play bishop d6. And if b7, he plays a4. And even if I win his bishop, I'm still losing because he has that passed a pawn. So before he can play bishop d6 and stop my b pawn, I took his bishop. Now if he takes my knight, I queen my b pawn. So for example, king takes knight, b6, b7. Hooray, go Ben. So he played king takes b5. Now this is very funny. I think it's funny. I started down a piece for 2 pawns. Now I'm ahead a piece for 2 pawns, but now I'm fighting for the draw because he has the passed a pawn and my king isn't playing. But luckily, I am drawing still, but it's pretty lucky. So when he had a piece for 2 pawns, he was better. Now that I have a piece for 2 pawns, he's still better. That's why he became world champion and I didn't, because he's always better. Doesn't matter what the material is. Okay, knight c2, hoping his pawn doesn't queen. Run my king over. Pushes his pawn. I get there just in time. And when I don't want you to queen, then I stop you from queening. And this move isn't necessary, but it's still probably the best move. Knight a1. And in this position, we agreed to a draw because I just moved my king back and forth. If he takes, I play king a1, king c1. And this is just going to be a stalemate. He can push, well, I flipped the board by accident. He can push his pawns forever, but it's going to be stalemate in the end. For example, and then it's stalemate. So black has no winning chances. White has no winning chances. So after knight a1, we agreed to a draw. And I could just repeat with knight c2, knight a1. And he could never queen, for example. If he queens, then he's risking losing. Because I can play king c1 and make sure that I never lose. But I could also play for the win. Since my king is better than his, I'd rather have white in this position. So he has no winning chances. I have no winning chances because we just moved back and forth. So after knight a1, we agreed to a draw. And that was the only FIDE-rated game I've ever played against Anand. He ended up tying for second in the tournament, and I did not. I think I lost my last round. Terrible. But that's actually where I met Vishy in '86 in England. And we've been friends ever since. Might even be friends now. I don't know. What do I know? Let's see. When's '86? 38 years ago? I've been on for 38 years. Yeah, getting old over here. Okay, so when there's an imbalance with pawns versus a piece, as we saw the last couple of games, the side that has the pawns has to get them going. They got to get to the 4th rank, 5th rank, 6th rank, and in this case, the 7th rank. And when I had the pawns for the piece, my D pawn was going to D6 and D7, and I was trying to promote my pawn, sort of like Dingler did today in the World Championship when he played D3, D4, D5, D6, D7. And then he was going to play D8 Queen, so Gukesh resigned. So when you have pawns for a piece, sometimes the piece wins because you're up a piece. Sometimes the pawns win because the pawns get to the end of the board. And we both had pawns for a piece that game, so you saw what happened. Okay, let me flip the board. This is a game I played in 1989 at the Euwe Memorial against Marjan Mitkov. He was an FM, and I was also an FM. We've got this material imbalance where I have a queen and knight for 2 rooks and a bishop. And black is winning here for a couple of reasons. One is his bishop is horrid. His bishop on E1 is blocked by all of his pawns here, and his white squares are quite weak. You know, I can come in here and he can't stop me. The other reason is I'm a pawn ahead. I have 7 pawns and he has 6. So I have an extra pawn. My knight's better than his bishop. My king is safer than his. And his rooks aren't very active. They're on the 1st rank and they can't get any juice going. Okay, so I played E5 to open the position up a little bit. Not necessarily that important. I want to play Queen H3 checkmate, so he moved his king. Funny checkmate, Queen H3. But he didn't let me checkmate him. I tried. Always repeat. There's my extra pawn on C6. I started pushing my pawn. And he sacked the exchange. This position is quite bad for white because white can't move anything. For example, you might say, why doesn't white move his bishop and attack your queen? Well, the bishop is defending the F2 pawn, and black can play queen F3 check. So if you play bishop D2, for example, you just get checkmated. So white can't move their king to a good square. White can't move the bishop to a good square. White moving pawns doesn't do anything. White's rooks can't move very much. So he sacrificed the exchange and got my pawn for it. And this looks like good chances for a draw because he just sits here and chills. His bishop is defending his F pawn. Bishop's defending his A pawn. Black has no passed pawns. So he can just wait around. Sort of like the first game I showed you with Dexter Thompson. Now, the reason black is winning is black can move the king up the board and get an attack and force white into making some concessions. So we check a few times, then we move our king up, check some more, move our king up, keep moving our king up. Yeah, move our king all the way up. So now white doesn't have many moves in this position. White can't really move anything anywhere. So he played bishop c3, attacking my g pawn. I just checked and played f6. No pawn for him. Bishop e1, queen check, and then my opponent resigned because if he plays bishop c3, I can take. And a good puzzle for you at home, whether you're watching live or watching later on YouTube, the king moves away. Black has a very nice way to win here. And when I looked at the engine earlier, it said black is plus 84. That's a big plus. And can anybody in our live audience tell me the winning move for black?
Queen takes rook.
It is queen takes rook. We have a good live audience. Yeah. Queen takes rook, king takes, and the king and pawn ending is very easily winning for black. Activating your king is very important in the endgame, which I've said many times. So whatever white does, white's completely lost. So white resigned here. I got to move my king up. My queen was better than his rooks. My knight was better than his bishop. I had an extra pawn, and he tried to defend, but he ended up not being able to do it. So king activity is important. Minor piece activity is important. And when you have 2 rooks for a queen, your rooks have to get active, and his rooks were always on the first rank, A1 and E1 and D1, C1. So he never got anything active with his rooks. Okay, next game is with Paul van der Sterren. He took my queen. Now, somebody told me a long time ago, although after this game, that this ending with this material imbalance, it occurred in an Alekhine game. I haven't seen that game, so it could be they were lying. Or it could be I haven't seen the game. That's more likely. And they said Alekhine had the 2 rooks and he won. And obviously, with the pawn structure the way it is, that actually determines who has the advantage. This is 3 pieces versus 2 rooks. This is the kind of ending the sponsor is really looking for, a really big imbalance of material where we don't have any of the same pieces. And I remember looking at this with an engine a long time ago, 15, 20 years ago, and it said it was equal. And I was like, man, I got crushed. How is this equal? And I looked at it with an engine today, a good engine, because engines are better now than they were 15 years ago. And it just said white has a big advantage. And I was like, yeah. And again, the most important thing is the activity of the rooks. I mean, white has an extra piece. White has 3 pieces to 2. Rooks are supposedly better than minor pieces, so that helps. But if the rooks are better than the minor pieces, that has to be shown. Like, show me why the rooks are better. And here, there's one open file, and the rooks cannot go to any of these squares. The whole file is blocked up. Once white plays bishop d3, black can't even go rook c4. So black is stuck on 2 squares. Because black can't activate his rooks, white is much better here. And I got completely destroyed, which is unfortunate because it's my lecture. So white played knight c5, attacking my pawn. Attacked my pawn again. And got the knight to c5, completely dominating the c file. And I mean, black's rooks are just totally impotent. White opens up the center, weakening my d pawn. Obviously, I can't take because bishop takes, skewers the rooks. Bishop b1 is an excellent move. White wants to take on d5 and then play bishop to a2, attacking the pawn, which is what happened. Unfortunately, if I play rook d6, plays bishop c7, and then I resign. There's nothing I can do. I can't defend my d pawn, which hanging with check. So I ran my king away. Now, I was hoping I could get my pawn back, but with this skewer, but I can't because if I take the pawn, then he has knight e6 check, forking my king and rook, and he'll have 2 bishops for a rook. So I played king h6, tucking my king away, and now he has an extra pass pawn. I sacked the exchange for nothing. I could just resign here. My f pawn's hanging, my rook's hanging, his d pawn's coming, my a pawn's hanging. I tried to trade everything off, but he checked me. If he takes this, then I can take And this is still lost, but I'm threatening stuff. I can take stuff. But he checked me and played d5. Now he has 2 bishops and a pawn for a rook, and I have no hope. So I got completely crushed that game, and I was glad that the new engines say that position is terrible for black, because when you have 2 rooks against 3 pieces, or a rook and 2 pieces, or a queen, your rooks have to get active. The last 2 examples we saw, the rooks did not get active. They couldn't get active. Okay, and last but not least, this is against Lothar Vogt at Dortmund in 1990. He was higher rated than me. I had white. And this position, black has 2 bishops for a rook, and there's some weak pawns on the board, and black is obviously better. Now, black's better now, but there's later too. Okay, so I played rook to d7, activating my rook instead of taking the pawn on e6. So now my rook is really active. I'm threatening the b7 pawn. I'm threatening knight takes e6. And he played an excellent move, bishop to h6. I took on b7. Now he made a mistake. The engine says black is much better by just taking. And when you have pieces against a rook, like a bishop and knight against a rook, or 2 bishops against a rook, you want there to be lots of pieces and pawns on the board so your pieces can attack and threaten things and so forth. White wants to trade everything off and have no pieces on the board, so it's like bishop and knight against rook. And there's no pawns on the board, that's a draw. If the rook has more pawns, then white's probably better. So rook takes pawn's a good move, but he traded bishop for knight. That lets white equalize right away. And the reason he did it is he wanted to pass pawn. I can't really blame him. Okay, he played rook f2, activating his rook. Wants to play bishop e4. I played rook a4, no bishop e4 for you. a5, rook c4. Now white is okay. Defended his knight. I attacked it again. King f7. Now, it's probably a draw if I take his knight, but I didn't want to draw. So if I take his knight, I'm going to lose my b pawn, and black has 2 passed pawns here, so I think only black can be better, but I assume this is a draw with correct play. Could be I'm wrong. So I played h4, get my pawns going. I have 3-1 on the king's side, so I might as well advance my pawns. Knight e5, playing for the win. Rook e4, knight back to c6, rook check, knight e7, king g1. And in this position, my opponent was in time trouble. And in fact, black lost the game on time. Not here, but later, just proving he was in time trouble. And he made the losing move in this position. White's better in this position, but black should play something like rook f5. And I have a rook and pawn for 2 pieces. His knight is pinned. His pawns are all isolated. So white's a little bit better. But he blundered here. He played a tactical move that you guys will like, except it's not good. Rook takes g2 check. And I think if he had half an hour on the clock, he wouldn't have played that. But he had less than 5 minutes. And this was in 1990. We didn't have increment or delay. We didn't know what that was. So you just, whatever time you have, that's the time you have. So he was low on time. And I took, and he played the super fork skewer pin. It's all of them. Although it's not a skewer, it's just a fork and a pin. And you might say, wow, that looks great for black. Why are you saying this is bad? Well, it turns out black's actually lost here. So if you're watching on YouTube later, pause your video and try to figure out how white wins in this position. If you're watching live, and you're feeling it, you can try to figure out how white wins here. But I don't expect to get a right answer because it's not easy. But maybe my audience is super smart. White's a play and win.
Rook takes knight.
Rook takes knight was said. Yep.
Then king f3.
Then king f3. And this is winning for white. And when I played this for white, there's one variation I had in mind. And my opponent played bishop takes rook and his flag fell. So I won on time, but this is completely winning. But the move I was worried about, until I figured out I shouldn't be worried about it, was king f7. That's the correct move. Because now white only has one winning move. Can anybody find the winning move for white?
H5.
Put it in H5. Yeah, my live audience is really smart today. Stopping king g6. After bishop takes, I don't have to unpin myself. And this is just an outside pass pawn win. You know, H5, king E5. There's nothing that black can do here. Black's completely lost. So he lost on time, showing he was in time trouble at the end. But he would have lost the game anyway. So that was a lot of positions with imbalances. And I want to go over some of the lessons we learned. When you have extra pawns and your opponent has extra pieces, those pawns need to move forward. You need to get your pawns active. 5th rank, 6th rank, 7th rank. And when you have extra pieces, you want everything on the board. You don't want to have bishop against 3 pawns. You want to have 2 bishops, a knight, and 4 pawns versus like 2 bishops and 6 pawns. You want to have a lot going on so your extra piece can show. When you have any ending where you have extra rooks, your rooks have to be active. Sometimes your opponent has a queen, sometimes your opponent has 3 pieces, and your rooks have to be active and be on open files on the 7th rank. And if you don't, those positions can be lost even if it looks like material's about equal. So these endings are all different, and in some of them I lost and maybe I shouldn't have, and in this one I won and I shouldn't have, because things worked out well for me as far as the piece activity was concerned and the extra pawns and the passed pawns and advancing the king. In this game, surprisingly, my king walked up the board and his did not. So I ended up winning because of my active king. Anyway, that was a very interesting subject for a lecture, unusual material imbalances in the endgame. So if you want to sponsor a lecture, again, contact my wife, Karen. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe and leave a comment. That helps the channel out tremendously. And I'll see you guys next time with more weekly lectures. Sometimes they're on people, sometimes tournaments, sometimes openings, and in this one, imbalances and endgames. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye.